All right, talking about the flood of Noah again. Um, so we're going to answer a couple of objections today that are pretty simple to answer once you think about it. And the objections are always the same ones. They don't really get new objections. It's either about the flood itself or it's about the ark. Okay. Today we're going to talk about the ark. So a couple of the objections are how do you feed all the carnivores? Okay. Well, that's actually answered in the scripture if you think. Um, Noah was commanded to take two of every unclean animal and seven of every clean animal. What's the difference between a clean and an unclean animal? The difference is that you're allowed to eat clean animals. So why are you taking seven of those? For food. So lions had food, people had food. Um, everything solves that solves everything as far as what you're gonna do and what you're gonna eat and what about the carnivores and the lions and the tigers and whatever. Okay. Which brings us to our second point. There's no way he could have fit two of every species on the planet. Well, that's true. Okay. There's no way. But people don't understand the way nature actually operates. They have an idea of what they're taught in grade school or what they're taught in college, but what they're not taught and what's not exposed is the fact that these animals can reproduce with one another in a very wide spectrum kind of a way. What I mean to say is all the bears can interbreed. Uh, all the big cats can interbreed. And most sharks can interbreed. Um, birds can interbreed like crazy. The evidence for this is in the literature. If you just do a couple of quick Google searches, which is like the worst possible way to do research, but it will give you answers to these kinds of things. Apiaries in Europe and bird breeding organizations. They have these societies or whatever that breed these things, that breed all different kinds of birds. And the amount of birds that can interbreed is just mind-blowing. It's huge. There's a bunch, way more than I thought. So we get into it, and the more I got it, like bovine, bulls and muskox and yak and all these different, they can all interbreed with each other, which that means that they're all much more closely related genetically than what millions and millions and millions of years of evolution teaches. And then we found out about epigenetics, which the DNA can turn on or off certain characteristics and cause an organism to act in very, very different ways very rapidly within one generation. And one of the ways we found this out was the survivors of the concentration camps. We studied the children and the way that they processed food, they processed and stored energy was remarkable. And they all had the same thing. They were much more efficient and stored energy and fats uh, way better than most people do. And it's because this epigenetic engaged and said, okay, we're going to turn this on. We're going to go into energy saving mode because our parents' DNA went through this and there was a change. So we studied this and we learned a lot about it. And there's lots of people that are super, super smart about this stuff. Um, I can get you in contact with them, no problem. Um, so when we study what's actually happening in nature and the empirical evidence, empirical means something we can for sure know. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. This is absolutely for real, no guesswork involved. It doesn't depend on what your point of view. It doesn't depend on your philosophy, your ideas. This is what it is, right? When we look at that, we see that these creatures are actually very, very closely related, can all interbreed with each other, and very, very easily could have come from one pair of animal or seven pairs of animals, okay? Or seven animals. We talked about how one man couldn't have cared for the animals on the ark, which is baloney. Um, there's tons and tons of things that one man has done. First of all, there wasn't one man. There was 8. 4 men, 4 women, and they all cared for it. And then if you design a structure, and say what you will about Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis and all these guys, but the replica, the Noah's Ark there that they've built, does a fantastic job of showing how just a few people, if you build the thing right, very, very easy to take care of the waste, very, very easy to take care of disseminating food, these kinds of things. Not hard. Of course, it's hard work. You got 8 people to do it. You got nothing better to do, right? It ain't like you got to go do a 9 to 5 and then come home and feed all the animals. That ain't, no. And even today we have ranches, and we have pig farms and chicken farms and all these things where just a couple of people take care of tens of thousands of animals. So yeah, there's that. And then there's the whole thing with the water. They say that freshwater fish couldn't survive in the saltwater, and the saltwater fish couldn't survive in the freshwater, and therefore, okay, so first of all, there's places in the world, right, where these two waters come together at certain points, and they have different densities. Salt water tends to sink, fresh water tends to float on top. That's real, okay? If you get, again, a simple Google will show you these places. So there's that. But again, we're going to go to what you can physically see and for yourself. You don't got to take anybody's word for this. Go to Jacksonville, Florida, and go visit the St. Johns River. And what you're going to see is they have manatees, right, that are in the river. And the river's brackish, meaning it's got some salinity to it, but it's not saltwater. It's not freshwater. It's something in the middle. And you got freshwater and saltwater. You got whales. You got pufferfish. You got all these different kinds of things from the ocean going into and staying in this brackish water. And they have all these signs set up so that if you got a boat, you're supposed to be aware of it. They have big festivals about these whales that come in and during certain seasons, so on and so forth. Sharks, there's beware of sharks in the river, these kinds of things. Lived there for 2 years, and it was really amazing. So this whole idea that freshwater and saltwater fish can't survive something like a flood is just, it's not true. It's just not. And again, I'm talking about something you can see for yourself. I'm not talking about what somebody else said or this scientific papers that this guy wrote or whatever. Go look for yourself. Go see with your own eyes. So, and then there's no way that 1 man or 8 men or 4 men or however you want to dice it could build this thing, could build the ark. Well, that's not true either, because what if I told you that 1 man built an entire castle by himself? How about 1 man building an entire island by himself? At Spearfront, I have an entire section under the Noah's Flood page where it goes through and talks about enormous things and remarkable things that 1 person built by themselves. And we, in some cases, the guy's still alive and he's still doing his thing. But none of this is questioned. This is all well documented, and it's really amazing, but that doesn't make it untrue. Likewise, there's this guy in Germany or Denmark that built an ark. He actually built it on the water, and he built it himself, him and a couple of guys. Okay, he was a millionaire and had a construction background, so him building it wasn't a big deal. He just did it. He actually built 2. The first one was half the size. The second one was full size. So yeah, there's that. So all these objections that people come up with for the ark, they they're simply wrong. The ark wasn't seaworthy. Okay, well, actually, if you research the USS Wyoming, it was about the same size as the ark, and it lasted a year. It sailed all over the place. Okay, now the big difference between the Wyoming and the Ark of Noah is that the Wyoming had sails. Okay, and sails have enormous mast. They make it very top heavy. Okay, it also had um, steam engines on the front and the back for hoisting the anchors. Okay, so that's going to increase the weight, and it's going to decrease the stability because you don't have uniformity from the bow to the stern. Okay, and yeah, they say that it was hard to handle and all this and that, but if you're going to have something that's going to be that top heavy, right, and you're going to have something that has steam engines on the front and the back of it, it's going to cause twisting because as energy hits the front and it's made of wood and you have a weight there and you have a counterweight in the back, that's going to cause the entire ship to twist. And that was one of the problems they incurred. You know, the Ark doesn't have this. It's entirely wood and it's uniform from the bow to the stern, so it's not going to suffer those problems. But to say that an entire ship that big, made of wood, would not be seaworthy is simply false. As the USS Wyoming was an inferior design because it had to have the sails and because of the iron pumps on it. And of course, the weight distribution wasn't proper. But it sailed and it served the United States military for over a year. So these are the kinds of things that people get into, and they don't understand. Then they'll say, well, the USS Wyoming didn't work after a year. Yeah, but neither did the Ark. It wasn't made to do that. It was made to do the job. The job didn't require 5 years of service. It required, what, 7 months? Yes? Okay. So, when people come at me with these objections, I understand their objections. I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they're trying to say. But these are readily answered. There's nothing there. I'm not going to get all hung up because somebody doesn't understand a thing. I'm going to try and help them. What I found is they don't really want the help, and when you answer these series of objections, they're just going to come up with another one. And it doesn't matter how far down the rabbit trail you go. You can answer this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, and they don't just change their mind. It isn't like, oh, well, okay, you're right about the bears and the tigers and all these different things in the breeding, and you're right about the USS Wyoming, and you're right about the brackish water, and you're right about this, and you're right about that, but I still don't believe it. Okay, all right, cool. You know what? But at that point, it's no longer about the evidence, is it? It's just not. And to be truthful, what I found is it's not ever about the evidence. People are going to believe whatever they want to believe, one way or the other. I've met Christians who believe what they want to believe, and they don't have very sound reasons for believing it. They just believe whatever, and it's like, okay, now I can't change your mind. I can't make you change your shirt. Can't make you change your shoes. Can't make you change your mind. All I can do is show you, and the rest is up to you. But the evidence, if you're going to be logical, and you're going to look at the evidence and say, what really happened here? I mean, the evidence is strong. It's really strong. And that's just the way it is. Guys, go love each other.